The more authentic you are, the more you lean into the things that light you up, that are in direct resonance with who you are as a human being, the more you connect to your divine nature.
What do you think is different between the spirit and the soul?
You can't completely get rid of fear. I think what starts to overshadow fear is courage and just trusting in yourself, believing in yourself, and having self-sovereignty. So the more you know yourself, the less afraid you will be when you step into whatever space you're trying to step into.
Why do you think humans have this craving? Do you think it's an innate quest we have in us? Were we born with it? Or is this something that we grew to be curious about?
Yes, Stan, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Jummie. I am the host of Shifting Dimensions, which is a podcast that's focused on spiritual exploration, metaphysical investigation. I'm a hyper curious person, so I'm always trying to get deep into those things. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that today on the show. So that's me in a
Right.
nutshell. Again, I'm excited to be here and speaking with you.
You got a lot going on. I'll be rooting for you over here.
Thank you.
Whatever knowledge and experience you have, please, you're always welcome to share.
Of course.
Okay. First question I'd like to ask you, why podcasting? Why did you get into podcasting?
That's a good question. Let me set the scene for you. It's 2017, feeling all these different feelings in terms of like, who am I? What is my purpose? And all of these different things, like having some sort of like an existential crisis because I'm the eldest of four girls. I'm Nigerian. So a lot of times you're expected to live your life a certain way. So come 2017, I'm living my life one way and I'm like, it's not really working for me. So I was talking to one of my friends and he told me about this podcast he was listening to. And I was like, what's a podcast? I'd never heard about a podcast before. So I started listening to podcasts and at first it was a banter podcast, but then eventually because I was at a point in my life where I was seeking more knowledge on mental health and how to kind of live a more intentional life, I found myself kind of getting into more spiritually focused psychology type podcasts. So I was like, oh my gosh, I really love this stuff. So I consumed so much of it. So fast forward to 2020, the pandemic happens. And I was like, I had been thinking about starting my own podcast for a while, but when you're working a 9 to 5, by the time you come back home, because those were the days where we were commuting, by the time you come back home, you don't have time to think about a podcast. So when 2020 happens, we're all at home. I have this extra time. I'm like, you know what? Let me start brainstorming about podcasts because I really want to do this. I feel like it's really helped me. And I love talking about mental health and wellness and all that stuff. So I started A Word to the Wise. That was like my first podcast. Did that for 4 years. Again, I was so passionate about talking about psychology, spirituality, how to become a whole person. And I had this insatiable curiosity that I wanted to explore. So I started the podcast. But then I soon realized that I was still playing small because I was very drawn to metaphysical concepts and spiritual concepts, but I didn't want to be judged for some of the conversations that I wanted to have. So I did A Word to the Wise for 4 years. And then eventually in 2024, early last year, I decided to again live my life as authentically as possible and just, dive in head first and focus on the things that I actually care about, which is again like all these spiritual and metaphysical things. So I started Shifting Dimensions. So the podcast, to really answer your question, was a way for me to express myself and also give people the tools to heal and find themselves, and also allow me to explore all these spiritual and metaphysical concepts that I was really passionate about. So that's why I started podcasting.
Yeah, a lot of amazing things were created during the pandemic. A lot of great ideas, and a lot of people explored and had, like you said, had time in their hands and invested in their ideas, and great things came out of it. Just going back to what you said something about not being judged. Why did you feel that way? Does it have to do with anything, you being Nigerian? Because I'm Nigerian, so I know I can relate to what you just said. But can you go a little bit deep and explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, thank you. When I talk about being judged, as Nigerians, a lot of us were very like Christianity, 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 Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And if you're exploring anything or questioning anything about the Bible, it's considered heretical. So, when we talk about metaphysical concepts and spirituality, we are looking into near-death experiences, we're looking into psychics, we're looking into meditation, we're looking into parallel universes, we're looking into really the nature of reality, right? And because religion is so dogmatic, sometimes when you explore these other topics, people look at it as like maybe you're starting to dip your toe into witchcraft, which they consider evil, or the occult, or like, off in the deep end because Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, right? And some of the conversations I would want to have on the podcast, for example, is talking about the Bible, right? The God in the New Testament and the God in the Old Testament sounds like two different beings, right? And if I want to ask a question like, okay, why is God so vengeful and why does God care so much about whether or not you love him? That sounds like human characteristics. You can't ask those questions again because it's heretical. So I was just scared of being judged. If the aunts and uncles found my podcast, they'll now start saying, what's this babe talking about? You know what I mean? Like, what is she saying? So that was what was kind of holding me back, because when I first launched A Word to the Wise, my first podcast, of course I share it with my parents. They're sharing it with all the aunts and uncles. And I'm like,
They
I'm
approved
like
of that.
scared of, exactly. I'm like, oh, maybe then we just keep it cute. I was still talking about spiritual concepts there, but not too in depth. So when I launched Shifting Dimensions, I was like, I'm not telling anybody. It took me a while to even tell my parents. And I warned my parents. I was like, don't send this to the aunts and uncles. If they find it, they find it. But I don't care that much anymore. But that's why I was scared, because I didn't want them to think I was like a witch or something.
What did your parents say though? They approved of it?
They know me. I've always been the type of person in the middle of, like, I don't know, dinner with family, be like, oh, what do you guys think about aliens or something like that? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So they know that I'm pretty quote unquote out there and curious about the world in a very spiritual, metaphysical way. So me starting Shifting Dimensions, I mean, it was really on brand. And I remember my mom saying, because I was telling her, I was like, oh, mommy, I didn't really want to tell you because I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to be discouraged. This was something I need to do for myself. And she said, Jummie, if people listen to your podcast, if those aunties and uncles listen to your podcast and they don't like it, that's their business. Like, not everybody's going to like what you have to say, but you have to be true to yourself. You know what I mean? Now, do
Yeah.
I think she listens to all my podcasts? I don't know if she would still have that same opinion if she listened to every single podcast, but she's encouraging. So they accept the work that I'm doing, because, and if they didn't, doesn't matter. I'm grown. I have to do what makes sense for me.
Yeah. You come from a very religious background?
So, well, my parents were devout Catholics. They are still devout Catholics, but they're not super dogmatic. So I never grew up in one of those like Nigerian Christian households that were super dogmatic. So I think that's why I also have this level of freedom as well to kind of do what I need to do. And my parents are like, okay, whatever. My parents are just they're chill. They're Christian, but they're chill. They're laid
The
back.
chill Christian.
Yeah, they're the chill Christians.
They're doing their thing, chilling. Okay. Let's go on and ask you the second question I have for you, which is what do you think is the importance of exploring the unknown, and why are we so curious and quick to make assumptions about the unknown? Why do you think humans have this craving? So do you think it's an innate quest we have in us? Were we born with it, or is this something that we grew to be curious about?
I love that question. I think there was like the first part of your question was like, why do you think it's important to be curious? I
Yeah.
think it's important to be curious because that's how you learn, right? That's how you evolve. That's how you expand your heart and your mind. So you can't be so one dimensional in your thought. It's important to get different perspectives, because as human beings, we're unique in the way we look, in the way we think, in our culture. So of course, the world is also unique in the way, I guess, reality manifests itself and spirituality manifests itself in different cultures, right? So it's important to be curious and have an open mind, because the more you know, first of all, the less you know, but the more you know, the more you learn about yourself and others. And then also, why do I think humanity has always been curious about the other side and God and spirituality and all that stuff? I think it's because we know, and I think we can sense innately, that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. We have a very spiritually rich life and existence, even though a lot of us don't recognize it, especially in our sleeping world, in our dream state. We're constantly dreaming and having all these different things come up in our subconscious or conscious mind as we sleep. That's not of this realm, because when you sleep, the dream state does not mimic the waking world. You know what I mean? So I think we know that innately. And I think for a while, actually, we strayed away from that path, right? We were at a point for a very, very long time where we were so focused on the materialistic way of looking at things in the world. And now we're at an age where we're kind of going back and looking at the metaphysical and the spiritual elements of what it means to be a human being and kind of moving away from this materialist worldview and perspective.
That's a great answer. I've never really thought of it that way, looking through the lens of dreams, because it's pretty true that, I mean, you're not physically there in your dreams, but subconsciously. So, yeah, that's a great insight. To add to that question, what is the importance of challenging your beliefs just like you did as a kid when you were growing up?
So I think we all know that when we're born, we're kind of indoctrinated into a system, right? So I was born a Christian. I didn't choose that for myself. And a lot of times,
Born into Christianity.
yes, born into Christianity, exactly. Did
I
not
don't think
choose.
you were. I don't think you were born a Christian.
Exactly.
No,
Thank you for
you didn't come in baptized.
that is a good point. Thank you for saying that.
Did you? Did you come out with a Bible?
Straight out the womb with the Bible, with the cross, like ready to go. Thank you for clarifying that. But the point I was trying to make is that we're indoctrinated into these different systems, right? Religious systems, education systems, government systems, and we don't really have a choice. We just start going with the crowd. You know what I mean? So a lot of times, a lot of people will say that their whole life was kind of like mapped out for them. They were just kind of going by a certain blueprint, but they don't take a step back to be like, wait, why do I believe in Jesus Christ? Did I come to that conclusion myself or was I told to believe in that, you know? And another thing too is growing up, I would come across like Muslims or people who were part of other religious traditions. And something that I found all these people were saying was like, this was the one true way to God or salvation. And I used to ask myself, I'm like, so who's correct? So then, of course, rather than just arguing and saying like Jesus is the only way, I'm like, okay, well, let me look into these different traditions and figure out like what makes the most sense. Are any of them even making sense, right? So I think it's important to challenge your belief systems and be curious because a lot of the things you believe, you did not choose to believe them yourself. They were programmed. So I think it's important for all of us to kind of go on that journey and be open minded and open hearted to really decide and critically think, does this make sense? Or am I just kind of like a puppet without realizing that I've been a puppet this whole time?
Yeah, yeah. Now the question is how would that awakening happen? What sparks the light for somebody to even start thinking that maybe I'm even programmed? So that's the most difficult part of it all. Personally, I think when we learn and travel and get exposed to other cultures, we can now kind of contracts, like you just said, you Muslim, Christian, okay, so what's right? So if people don't go out of their own bubbles to see that there's something happening out of their own experience, then it's really hard to even realize that you are in an indoctrination. I guess that's the whole point of indoctrination, where you can't even think outside. That's something that's always bugged me with a lot of religious teachings, that anything outside of the belief is against the system or against God, basically. That's scary because now you don't even want to think because you're
Exactly.
scared you might be condemned just to use the same. And I'm like, hold up. If God made me with this brain, didn't he want me to use it to find him? So exactly. So that's a great point you have there.
Yeah. No, you hit the nail on the head. You're right. The point that you made about like a lot of these systems, like let's focus on religion,
Yeah.
they teach you to not think. They discourage a lot of times critical thinking or questioning things, right? Not everyone does that, right? There are lots of people in Christianity that welcome questioning and, getting to a place where you feel comfortable with the word of God, etc. But ultimately, the general culture, overarching culture, a lot of times is to not question things. Like you're not encouraged to think for yourself or you would be considered heretical. I mean, back in the day, when Christianity was becoming more and more prolific, if you went against certain teachings, you were killed for that, right? So it's very scary to think differently. But, to touch on something else that you said, like what ignites that spark, what gets people to start thinking? I think, first of all, you have to just be open minded in general and be curious. I think religion serves as a safety net for a lot of people because it provides structure, it provides rules. If I do X, Y, and Z, I will get to heaven, right? So when you start going outside the boundary of certain religious teachings, might feel ungrounded. So you have to be open to feeling ungrounded as you go on a journey where you're questioning things. But you have to be open-minded to it because sometimes people are just not open. They don't want to learn. They're not curious. They don't want to ruffle any feathers. So it starts with being open-minded. And
And
I
they're
think
also afraid.
sometimes
A lot of times there's also fear.
exactly, exactly. There's a lot of fear that comes with it because imagine you start, thinking outside of your group and what you were taught, you can lose your whole community. A lot of people do that, especially people who end up in religious cults. I've had a few people on my podcast talk about that and how painful and ostracizing it was when they started to break free from those religious cults that they were in. So it is a very scary experience. And then for some people, they have moments where, they might have a near death experience. Something shocking happens to them that shakes them awake and they have no choice but to go on this journey to
True.
dig deeper and to ask questions and become more curious.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. Something like NDE would definitely awaken you. And,
For sure.
some health problems too. Something, traumatic in your life gets you out of it. I know this is something you're interested in. So just go ahead and, in your own words, define the act of manifestation.
See, manifestation is a very interesting topic. I know that it's very ubiquitous and everybody talks about it. It's one of the more popular, more accepted spiritual concepts that even if you're from, even if you're Christian or Muslim, like you can talk about manifestation without feeling like, oh, you're gonna go to hell or something. I think manifestation, we're constantly doing it, first of all. I think manifestation really and truly is the alignment between your subconscious mind, your desires, and what reality is reflecting back to you. That's how I would define manifestation. And we're constantly manifesting. So a lot of times people do all this work to get to a certain outcome, which I'm not saying it's wrong, but manifestation is never turned off because we're constantly creating our own reality. We're constantly manifesting our own reality. I mean, we're talking today, but in many ways, I feel like I manifested you, right? Because again, don't want to harp on the whole Nigerian thing too much, but I was like, I would love to connect with other Black people or Nigerian people who are into the work that I'm doing and be able to talk to them about it freely. And then I feel like I manifested you, right? So again, it's not like I wrote down all these steps and was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do these affirmations every single day, which that works too. But again, manifestation is the alignment between what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're desiring in your subconscious mind and your reality catching up to that and reflecting it back to you. That's how I would describe it.
Okay. And this creation can be done consciously or unconsciously, right? You
Exactly.
don't have to be intentional about it. It happens on its own. Like if somebody's not aware of manifestation, or maybe don't even believe in it, are they still manifesting?
Yes. Like I said, you're constantly manifesting. So and you made a really good point. So I think what I was emphasizing was like the fact that it's happening all the time unconsciously.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of what's talked about when it comes to manifestation in mainstream is being conscious of what you're manifesting, right? And when you're unconscious of what you're manifesting, unfortunately, you might manifest things that are not your desired reality. They're not things you actually want, but because it's your belief system and because, you're in resonance with that thing, you keep calling it back to your life. So when you're conscious of the fact that, oh, wait, I'm constantly manifesting, let me reprogram my mind so that I align with what I actually want to draw into my life. So yeah, it's unconscious, but a lot of times when it's talked about, we're trying to move from the unconscious part of creating to the conscious part of creating because manifestation is all about creating.
Focused and purposeful creating that.
Exactly.
Perfect. How about overcoming fear and
Mm.
embracing your divine? How would you encourage somebody to do that?
Journey because there are things that come up for me that I'm like, oh, I thought I was over this. Like, for example, I consider myself a pretty good public speaker and I can go on stage and I can talk to an audience of 1,000 people. But when it comes to talking in the camera and posting it on TikTok and being visible that way, I kind of get very, very nervous, right? So I'm still working through certain fears and angst, and it's a journey. So, you're shaving off different
Layers.
levels, different layers, right? But what I would tell someone who's trying to overcome fear and angst, First of all, fear is a useful emotion because it tells you where you need to grow. And in order to grow, you have to look fear in the eyes, right? So it's kind of one of those things where, like, if you are supposed to jump off a cliff and you have a parachute, right? The fear of jumping, whether or not you have a parachute or not, is going to be scary, right? You're not going to reach a point while you're at the edge of the cliff where you're going to overcome the fear before you jump. You overcome the fear after you jump. Like when you've done the action, you've pushed yourself off that cliff and you're falling, and then your parachute goes off and you're like, wait a minute, okay, this is not that bad. So you have to do the thing that scares you. And if you have a spiritual practice as well, so, I pray whenever I'm scared. I talk to people that I trust. And I also write myself affirmations, right? And a lot of times you have to ask yourself, why am I afraid of this thing? Is it because I'm afraid of rejection? Am I afraid that I'm not worthy enough? I'm not smart enough? So really look yourself in the mirror. It has to do a lot with shadow work. And I don't know if you've heard that concept before,
I've
Stan.
heard it, not really explored it that much.
Yeah, so I would just say shadow work is the practice of looking at the darker parts of your personality. And the darker parts of your personality doesn't mean like the bad parts or the parts that you should be ashamed of, but the parts that there's a lot of work that you have to do around there, like whether it's addiction, whether it's shame, it's just a part of you and they're
That you
influencing
don't
you.
desire for the
Yeah,
parts that you're not. Okay.
exactly. So it's just the shadow parts of you, the parts of you that you put in a closet that nobody else sees, but you're constantly interacting with, right? It's just looking at those parts and healing them. And the more you heal them, the more you can kind of elevate to a state where you're not as afraid. And the thing is, like, you can't completely get rid of fear. I think what starts to overshadow fear is courage, right? And just trusting in yourself, believing in yourself, and having self sovereignty. So the more you know yourself, the less afraid you will be when you step into whatever space you're trying to step into.
The second part was an embracing your divine, the divine within you.
Yes.
What is that? How does that work? Is it your spiritual nature, the love in you? What does the divine within you mean, and how do you embrace it?
Yeah, so I think the divine in you, yeah, we could look at it as a situation of like, embracing the spark within you, the love within you, the compassion within you. But I think the most important thing about embracing your divine nature is embracing your authenticity. So, like I said, a lot of times we're born and we're indoctrinated into all of these different systems. But what we're told to do, the path that we're put on, is not the right path for us. So, a lot of times we have lost a connection to ourselves, our inner guide, our inner compass, and we don't trust ourselves. And a lot of the things that we desire, we start to have shame around those things, right? So, for example, again, growing up in our culture, the careers they tend to champion are, being a doctor, a pharmacist, a lawyer, an engineer, right? That's kind of the path that you're kind of encouraged to go down. But I was interested in psychology, right? I felt like I had a natural talent and affinity towards psychology. But that was discouraged and I didn't push back on it. Again, I was in high school, so a lot younger and all that stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is I spent several years after that lost trying to find my way. So I wasn't tied to my inner compass, and that's part of our divinity. So the more authentic you are, the more you lean into the things that light you up, that are in direct resonance with who you are as a human being, the more you connect to your divine nature. And connecting to your divine nature is not just being authentic, but it's accepting yourself for who you are, accepting what you like. You know what I mean? I'm not saying don't hold yourself accountable. Those are two different things. What I'm trying to say is, like, the more authentic you are and the more you allow yourself to go down a journey where you discover who you are, the more you connect with that divine nature and divine essence within you, because you come back in resonance with your inner compass, your inner light, your inner divinity.
I like that. Maybe I'll reach out to you to learn how to do shadow work. I ask this to every guest I have on the podcast, and I'm gonna ask you, what is consciousness in your words, and what does it mean to you?
I think we have individual consciousness and then we have collective consciousness. So I'm going to focus on individual consciousness. And I think consciousness, there are different levels, different dimensions to consciousness. And the consciousness that I'm talking about is that divine consciousness, that divine knowing of who you really are. And who you are is not just a human being in this suit, right? In this body, right? In this avatar. You're a spiritual being having a human experience. And I believe that consciousness is where that knowing is housed. Essentially, how I would describe consciousness kind of ties back into reconnecting with our inner divinity, right? And I think consciousness is that divine knowing that we all have that's not necessarily housed within our body. It's not necessarily housed within the brain that we can come in contact with, we can be in direct resonance with. But consciousness is just that, like, I guess, all knowing part of who we are as spiritual beings that understands that we are just passing through this reality, this existence, right? And the more conscious and the more awake we are, the more we realize that this is just, in essence, a holographic universe. This is not all that there is, right? Consciousness is what wakes us up. It's sort of like, thinking about the Matrix, right? When Neo, I think he's the main character. I haven't watched all the full
What? You haven't
series.
watched all of it?
Yeah, I know. I should because that's right up my alley. But I watched the first movie, which is really good, right? So it's kind of like when I don't know if he took the red or the blue pill. Whatever pill woke him out of that matrix, I feel like that is what is consciousness. It's like waking up and realizing, like, wait a minute, all of this is not what it appears to be. So it's just that next level of knowing, but from like a spiritual metaphysical sense.
Like an awareness.
Yes, deep, deep, deep awareness.
It's one of the best I've heard on the podcast. It's
I hope you're not just saying that.
no, it is. It's kind of went a little bit deep with it. I mean, I've had scientists on, so they have a different way of looking at it. That's more evidential, but I like the way you put it. In a more metaphysical way. So this is right up your alley. You're the NDE specialist, so I'm gonna ask you.
I don't know about all that.
I mean, you had tons of folks on your podcast. I've watched a couple of them, a lot of them, and it's really fascinating the stories they come back with. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm still on the fence on NDEs. I think it's all brain. I think it's all something that we produce in our minds or in our brains when we're dying. I think it's a chemical reaction. I don't know. I can't say fully that's what it is. There's no way you can tell. But it seems to me like all we've taken in when we were alive. I mean, they didn't die, but when they were active and alive, the brain kinds of the chemical imbalance of you dying or the shortage of whatever to your brain makes you hallucinate. But that's just like I said, I don't agree on I'm not fully into the concept and I'm not out. I don't know. I'm in the I don't know zone. So you dug in, you've explored it a lot, and maybe you pull me over. Let me go ahead and ask you. What's your take on it?
So I don't know if I call myself a near-death experience specialist, but like you said, I've interviewed quite a few people on the show. I've also listened to maybe close to 100 near-death experiences, so I can kind of talk about this subject. So I will start off with the most interesting story and then share my thoughts on near death experiences. So, wow, it's hard to pick. I've had a few interesting stories on the podcast, but one of the most popular story that I've shared on the podcast, one of my most viral episodes was with a guy called Vinny Tolman, and he was clinically dead. He actually ended up, he died because he took a supplement right before working out, but he took a dose that was way higher than he was supposed to take. It was a supplement that was shipped over from Asia, I think somewhere in Thailand. Don't quote me. But him and his friend ended up taking way too much. They didn't realize it was concentrated. So his friend and him had a reaction. He actually died. His friend did not die. So while he was going to the hospital, when, he passed out on the bathroom floor, they got him. As they were taking him over to the hospital, he died in the ambulance. And one of the paramedics there, the reason why he's still alive today was, even though he was dead, this paramedic just felt deep within him that they should still try to revive him as much as possible. But while all of that was happening, of course, Vinny left his body because he was clinically dead, and he went over to the other side and he was met with a guide. And during his experience, he had a life review, which is very common in near death experiences. But what was cool about his story was that he received 10 guiding principles of how people should live their lives here on earth. And some of those principles included being authentic, speaking the truth, really standard, but still very profound things that he got from the other side. And it really, really changed his life because prior to his near death experience, he was just kind of going with the crowd. He was hanging out with people that were not aligned with him. So after this experience, he completely changed his life. So that was a very, very, very interesting experience. And I'll share another one. There, I had a doctor on the show who was also a pretty devout Christian. And a lot of times doctors tend to be very like scientific. They're looking at the data. You can't really quantify near death experience. But this doctor, he died and he went over to the other side. And when he was on the other side, he could hear people praying for him. And he saw a particular saint. And he found out after he came back to his body that that saint, I think, was tied to Notre Dame in some way. And his wife had gathered a bunch of people to go to a chapel and pray to that particular saint to bring him back. So it was connected in that way. So I've, had so many
How did he
different.
die?
So he had pneumonia. It was really, really, really bad. And it took him about 6+ months to recover. It was
Wow.
really, really bad. Yeah. So long story short, so those are some of the conversations that I've had around near death experiences. A lot of the themes, people see their life review, how they've been living their life. Sometimes they're told, hey, it's not your time. They see loved ones on the other side. A lot of them bring back insights. A lot of them also bring back psychic abilities. I don't know if they're bringing it back or maybe it was dormant before they passed away, but now that they had that near death experience, they've come back into their body, their psychic abilities are heightened. That was the case for Vinnie Tolman, the guy who brought back the 10 principles, right? They become more psychic and more attuned to the other side. So those stories are very fascinating. And what do I think about near death experiences? So my thoughts about near death experiences have kind of changed over the years. I do believe that they are a real thing because a lot of these people are clinically dead, right? Meaning that there's no sign of life or brain activity, heart function, nothing. And so these people are considered clinically dead, right? So they leave their body and for some reason they're like kind of brought back to life, right? Maybe they're resuscitated in a way and their consciousness or their spirit, reunites with their body because it's not really time for them to go. And I think the reason why so many people are having these experiences is because we're at a stage, like I said earlier, where we're waking up to the fact that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? So people keep talking about evidence and looking at data, but this is data. You know what I mean? So many people are having the same experience to let us know that there's something beyond. This is not just speculation. There is something beyond. Now, to your point about like, okay, maybe there are chemicals in the brain that are making them hallucinate. So I don't necessarily think that there are chemicals in the brain that are making them hallucinate, but I do think that we create our own reality and that goes beyond the brain, right? Because again, we're talking about consciousness, what we believe. So a lot of people who are really religious, who have near-death experiences, for example, will go to the other side. And if they're Christian, they'll see Jesus. If they're Muslim, they'll see Muhammad because it was such an extreme belief that they had while in their human body. So I do think that there's something at play that even on the other side, we see the things that we want to see. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Now, I don't necessarily think that that's connected to the brain. However, with me saying all of that, I think that near death experiences again are evidence that there's something there on the other side, right? That there's something beyond this. Now, whatever that thing is, nobody really knows, right? Because people have so many different experiences. And a lot of people will say it's love and light and all the amazing things. Some people have also had near death experiences where they found themselves in hell. And then some people will say hell does not exist. So there are so many different things that come back that make me realize that a lot of times when people are having these near death experiences, they're seeing things that their subconscious wants them to see, but it might not necessarily be the whole truth of what's actually going on the other side. I hope all of that made sense because
Yeah, yeah.
there's a lot there.
Oh yeah, it does make sense. I'll just play devil's advocate and give a little bit of pushback. You said
Okay.
something about them seeing what they believed in before the death, before the experience. Okay, if it was really another dimension, which we don't have any, which we're not creating in our heads, or, we're not having some chemical imbalance or whatever, if it's not from the dysfunction of the accident or the sickness, why do they see different prophets? Why is a Christian seeing Jesus and the Muslim seeing Muhammad or any other religion seeing their leader, why don't you just see something central, something that would be a denominator? You see what I'm saying? Because
Yeah,
if you see what you believe in, it kind of points to the fact that you are the one creating it, but your mind is
Mhm.
hallucinating the same thing that you have believed all your life.
Yeah, so sometimes when you're dealing with other dimensions, right? Spiritual realms, things can shapeshift and take on different forms to bring comfort to people, right? So again, we're talking to people who've had near-death experiences and have been fortunate enough to come back and tell us what they saw. So if it's written in the stars that they're supposed to come back, but they're having this experience, then of course, if they, as a Christian, you see Muhammad, you can't really relate to that. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So I've been diving really deep into David Icke's work. A lot of people call him a conspiracy theorist. He's written many books about the nature of reality, reincarnation, near-death experiences, and how everything works. And he postulates that there's evidence around this too that he's gathered that a lot of times, this might be really out there. I'm still wrapping my head around it, but the idea is that certain parts
You're
of
safe on the
spirit.
spot. You're safe.
Okay, okay. So, and I don't want to butcher his thoughts or what he's put together, but essentially what I gathered from looking into his work is that, the way these realms work sometimes, they kind of work like AI, right? They're kind of algorithmic. So when you go on your TikTok, you see certain content that you can resonate with, right? Most of my TikTok are people that look like me, most of the time, and talking about the things that I'm interested in because that's what my algorithm is giving to me because I'm interacting with videos a certain way. So when people have near death experiences, because of how they've lived their life, of course, the algorithm on the other side is going to present to them what they're familiar with. You get what I'm trying to say? So again, it's like me going up there and seeing your grandmother. I didn't have a relationship with your grandmother here on earth. My spirit is not going to be in resonance with your grandmother, right? And sorry, I don't know if your grandmother's still alive.
Oh,
I'm
no,
not.
no. No, she's way past.
So it's
Okay.
kind of like that. And again, it's, these things become harder to kind of explain. And I'm not necessarily an expert here. I'm just kind of talking about some of the
Honestly,
things.
I don't think my grandmother would be annoyed either. So
I know. Your grandma's like, what do I have to do with this conversation? She's like, who's this girl calling my name? Um,
whenever
but it's
she's chilling and having fun, the other side, she's pretty okay with it. I'm sure she's not bothered.
Yeah. But essentially, the point I'm trying to make here is that, there's some thoughts around the fact that a lot of people who have near death experiences are interfacing with some sort of like metaphysical AI. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people will say that the things that are manifested in this world didn't just they're not just from this world, right? Like they kind of start off, on the spiritual plane. Some people have said that Earth is kind of like a mock version of like heaven or another dimension, right? And this is kind of like a photocopy of it. You know what I mean? So, when you think about that perspective of AI and how it works and all these different algorithms, that you could say like somebody who passes away and sees their relative or sees the religious, I guess, figure that they resonate with is because like that's their own personal spiritual algorithm, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it
Doesn't
does.
mean it's wrong. And the more that I look into these things, the more I realize it doesn't really matter who the person is coming in contact with. It's more about the message that they're receiving. Because I'm fascinated and curious about, okay, what's the real nature of reality? What is the other side like? So I pay attention more to that rather than the people that they're connecting with. Because whether you connect with Jesus or Muhammad, whoever, or Confucius, whoever you want to connect with, that's not the point for me. It's the message that comes from that wasn't even meant to
Oh
be a
man,
joke.
Julie, I'm furious. I know, right?
But yeah, that's my spiel, and I could, talk about this for like an hour because it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where currently that's how I'm looking at the whole near death experience and potentially what could be at play. But I do differ with you when it comes to like the brain hallucinating because I think because a lot of these people are clinically dead and they're seeing some people will die, a lot of people will die and see what's going on around them. So that guy, Vinny Tolman, when I told you the paramedic who was like, okay, I know this guy said, they said that this guy was dead, but I think we should try to resuscitate him one more time. That was not him hallucinating in his mind. That was a real thing that was happening that he was witnessing because he was a spirit. He wasn't bounded by the body. So he was able to see and hear and feel everything that was going on around him.
I mean, you won me over one step. So I'll do a
Good.
little
I'm
bit more
happy.
investigation. I'll do a little more investigation. I'm still on the fence, but you've moved me to your side a little bit. One thing you said that I've heard before was the comfort thing. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think whatever's on the other side would want to make you comfortable coming across it. Probably like spirit, energy, whatever, however you want to describe it. But they have to come in a way that you can feel comfortable. So that makes a lot of sense. From everything you said, whatever you believe here doesn't really matter there, basically. So let's say if you were a Muslim, Christian, whatever you are, when you get over there, those things were just in the physical. Like we don't carry those beliefs over there, do we? Most of those people that come back from the videos I've watched, they come explaining things differently, saying that there's no just one part, that it's not just Christianity, Muslim, it's, the unity is the love, is God loves everybody.
No, I agree with everything that you said. I think, yeah, again, it's less about who you come across or what being or entity. Again, like I said, it's a comfort thing. And
Yeah.
like you said, a lot of times when people come back, they kind of realize like all these belief systems that they had, they're man-made, right? So even if they are seeing Jesus Christ, they're not coming back still saying, most of the time, they're not coming back still saying like, oh, Jesus is the one true way. They're like, I saw Jesus, but it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're all one. It doesn't really matter too much what you believe. It's more about how you live your life, etc. So yeah, I agree with everything that you said.
Okay, I'm glad we got to an agreement. Okay, let's discuss spirituality and religion. Question for you: Are you religious, or
No,
spiritual, or
definitely spiritual. I think we're all spiritual, whether we have a spiritual practice or not, because I think
the
that is,
spirits, basically?
yeah, we're spirits,
Okay.
right? So because we're spirits, to me, sometimes when people say, are you spiritual? I know what they mean. So I'm not trying to be annoying here, but it's like, I don't know, it's like someone said, saying that like, are you a human being? It's like, well, I'm a human. Like, of course I'm a human being. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So whether you're actively looking at yourself in the mirror, like, oh, I have, two eyes and a nose and da 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 da, to kind of talk yourself up about being a human, you're a human being. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the way I see being spiritual. I'm a spirit, so I am spiritual.
Okay.
But I get what you're saying, but I'm more spiritual than religious because I'm not, I look at religion as being dogmatic and I'm not dogmatic. I'm, if anything, I'm a religious nomad. I pick a little bit from everywhere.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're more spiritual than religion. A little bit of
Yes.
religion in there for the structure, for knowledge, but
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
you you're more spiritual. What's the? I know this might be out there, but what do you think is different between the spirit and the soul?
That's a great question. I've been hearing a lot of people distinguish between the both of them, between the soul and the spirit. It's still kind of confusing to me. I haven't looked too deep into it, but what I think they're trying to say is that I think the way they describe the soul is almost as if the soul is the body of the spirit, right? Because we all have an auric field. We're energetic beings, right? There's so many layers to what it means to be a spiritual being, right? So we have an auric field, we have different energy systems in our body. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think the soul is maybe probably what, I hope I'm not having them switched, but I think the soul is what animates us, right? Potentially divine spark. But I think the spirit is larger than the soul. I think the spirit encompasses the soul, the body, everything that makes us,
Personality and stuff.
yeah, our personality. It encompasses way more than the soul does. I think the spirit is larger, has more depths, and I think it can travel across time and be in multiple places at the same time. I think the soul is a little bit different than that. And as we're talking, I'm
Go
just
ahead.
gonna look it up, soul versus spirit. Let me just make sure I got that right. Okay, so the soul is considered the essence of a person, encompassing their mind, will, and emotions, while the spirit is seen as the animating force or the part of a person that connects with the divine or a higher power. So essentially, that's what I was trying to say. I think this is simplified, but yeah, the spirit is much bigger.
Yeah. So when it connects with the unknown, or
Yes, exactly.
or the
Whereas
spirit
the
realm,
soul,
and the soul
yeah,
is you right here, the animation, who you are.
yeah, who I am, my desires, my emotions, what drives me. what personality, what, sparks me up. And the spirit is just, I think it's much deeper than that. But I do think we try to put things in buckets to help us to understand. I think all of these different, I guess, parts of us, different dimensions of who we are. Because if you look at it from a dimensional perspective, right? So our body is in the D world, right? In the materialist world, but we also have another part of us that's connected to the other side, to the God side, if you want to call it, to the other dimensions. So I feel like maybe the soul is connected to a certain dimension, a certain plane, and then the spirit is connected to like much higher dimensions. So yeah, that's how I would describe it for now.
So, do you have like a worldview that you go by? Let's say, morals.
A guiding principle, guiding
Yeah, maybe your
principles that help
morals,
me.
or do you take from the the good parts you want from other structures and religions out there, and or do you just go with the flow?
No, I
Hey,
definitely have a
that works too.
I know that works too. A lot of times I go with the flow because, like I said, I'm a curious person, so my mind is always shifting and changing. But I do have a grounding principle, and that grounding principle, not to sound cliche, is love. My religion really is love, compassion, understanding, and anything that promotes fear, anything that promotes separation, anything that just promotes the lowest parts of our nature as a species, I don't subscribe to.
You just define
So
religion.
well, that's how religion is supposed to be, but unfortunately, that's not always the case, right? Because religion
You know,
says
I'm
if
saying that all the things you just defined, the separation, the lowest,
oh,
everything. That's
I think we're talking about love, and yeah, isn't that ironic? But it's interesting because I don't inherently think religion is a bad thing, and I think there's so many people who are very devout in their religion, who are very kind, loving people. But of course, I think, again, religion is so dogmatic and puts people in a box. So while someone who's very loving, who's a Christian, can love someone who's different from them, they might still think that person is going to hell, but they might still love them. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a little weird.
I know. That's the difficult part about religion, the dogmatism. Okay, so let's go home. Let's
Okay.
travel. Let's travel back home. What's your opinion on what happened to Africa, the spirituality and our worship system from the past, ancestors and all the beliefs
It
that they
makes me
had?
so Yeah, I think it makes me so angry when I think about it sometimes because I feel like, yes, while we are all one, I think there are layers, there are different buckets, and there are different levels to all of these things that we're talking about here. So I'm gonna try as best as possible to articulate what I'm trying to say. While as human beings we're all one, at the end of the day, there are certain things that are different about us that speak to our collective identity. So you and I are one. We're not necessarily separate from each other. However, my soul and personality is different from yours, right? So while we are one, we're not necessarily walking the same path. And what works for you and your identity is not going to work for me and my identity, right? Especially if bare bones, you're a man, I'm a woman, right? We have different cycles, right? We have different, what do you call it? What's the word when it talks? We have different hormonal cycles, for example. So, we're together but separate, if that makes any sense, right? So I use that example to kind of use that as an analogy to kind of talk about the fact that as a human race, we're all one. But as people, when it comes to race and cultures, we have a collective consciousness, collective identity that works for certain groups of people over other groups of people. And one of our pillars was found a lot of times in our spiritual and religious identity and traditions because our culture is very rooted in ancestral recognition, worship, however you want to call it, right? And just connecting to our ancestors, right? Our collective soul, our collective consciousness. So I feel like because African religious traditions and spirituality have become so demonized, a lot of Black and African people, there's a almost spiritual psychosis because we're disconnected from what feeds our collective identity as spiritual beings, as Black African people, if that makes any sense. So I think we're at a point now where people are waking up and realizing, like, wait a minute, why were we told these traditions and spiritual practices were evil? Are they really evil? And then with any spiritual practice, there's good and bad. It depends on who's using it. Do you get what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say? So I think there's a call to go back to our roots and try to figure out, like, wait a minute. You know what I mean? Like, I've been going a certain way. So, for example, another analogy, so people understand it, as a Black person, I have a particular hair texture, right? So I need certain hair products to help feed and grow my hair, my crown. If I'm using a product from someone else's racial identity who has a completely different hair than mine, yes, it might help my hair to a certain extent, but it's not going to allow me to reach my full potential because that is not the right product for me. So it's kind of the same thing when we're thinking about these African religious and spiritual traditions. Because it was taken away from us, a lot of us were kind of lost on a spiritual level. And again, I'm excited that we're going back there, but it is a journey because a lot of people still consider these practices evil, demonic, and are not willing to kind of learn about the heritage and why it's important for us as Black African people to really understand our religious and spiritual practices, because I think on a collective level, it will just help us kind of advance better in society.
And the sad part of the whole thing is it's not even foreigners that are still demonizing it. It's us as a
Yes.
people back home look down and call it evil. And what was protecting them then? When they died, what happened to them? Did they all go to hell? How do you explain that? That's what upsets me about it. And the
Hmm.
invasion of religion, especially the foreign religion in Africa, that gets me all
Yeah.
worked up. I don't want to get into it now.
But again, like I said, people are waking up. People are waking up. So I think in the next couple of decades, we're going to see a massive shift. I think religion itself is kind
Hopefully.
of dying off, a slow death. So I think in the next couple of decades, you will see a different way of, you know, just saying and diving into our religious traditions that doesn't come from a place of fear.
Yeah, it should. Because even when I do visit Europe, a lot of places, especially Eastern Europe, that's where I spend a lot of time, don't even pay no mind to religion. The churches are like museums. They go to take
Mm,
pictures there,
mm.
but we exported it to Africa, and we are now all over it and using it against our own people. It's a
It's
it's a
crazy.
sad situation all around.
Yeah.
The next question would have to do with the current effects it had in Africa, especially Nigeria specifically. Now, how you feel about that?
So I think religion, in many ways, especially in Nigeria, has kept a lot of people stuck because with religion, there's this promise of, like, if you pray hard enough, you can get yourself out of poverty and you can pray yourself into a better life, right? So in many ways, it's keeping, and that's not the only reason why Nigeria is the way it is right now, unfortunately. And I'm not trying to say that whatsoever, but I do think it plays a role in how people think about power structures and the government and the way society is, right? You see a lot of people who are living below the poverty line, giving tithes at church, praying, doing all that they can because they're trying to get a better life. But that's not the way to a better life.
Oh no, economy doesn't work that way.
Exactly. So I think in many ways it's kind of kept us small in that way. But I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like, spirituality a lot of times has to do with your identity and that divine spark, knowing, and compass within you. And I think, again, as a collective people, when you stray away from your divinity, right? And I'm talking about us as a group, then you don't have a sense of that power that you need within you to fight for yourself, to take the right action. You are disconnected from it. You know what I mean? So I think as a people as well, Nigerians are not very nationalistic. It's every man for themselves. And that's because with religion, people are praying so that they can have a better life, but they're only thinking about themselves, right? And they're like, God will get me into a better situation. But it's like, it's not about God getting you into a better situation. The whole country needs to be in a better situation. You know what I mean? So
Everybody
I
around you.
yeah, exactly. So I think religion keeps people very, like, focused on themselves individually rather than thinking about the collective and being more nationalistic and thinking about, okay, how can we make this country better? Again, I'm not saying that's the only reason. I know
No,
that
it's
there's so
not.
many
Of
things
course, yeah.
at
But it's a
play,
big
but
part of it. It's a very big part of
yeah.
it, but it's not the only.
It's
or,
not the
you
only
know.
reason, yeah, but it's definitely a big part of it. And like when you think about the North versus the South, the North, it's, they're mostly Muslims over there, and it's completely different in terms of just how they live their life and what they consider appropriate versus not appropriate. They're really against like Western ideologies, you know what I mean? So, again, religion is a dividing force. And when religion becomes a dividing force within a country, there isn't that nationalistic pride to come together as a people to elevate, So that's kind of what I think the effects are currently.
Yeah, I would add it's also dangerous. I think
Yes,
religion
very
can be
dangerous.
dangerous.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just there's no update to it.
Yes.
If you believe that God wrote it or told somebody to write it down, hey, that's it. You can't change it.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way I say it. I just hope, like you said, I hope it's a phase that we all went through as humans. I know I have the feeling in the next 20, 30 years it wouldn't be of a grip as it has had in the past century.
Hmm.
You know, we as humans can move on. Humanity can move on as a whole.
Absolutely.
God willing, I'm still here when that happens.
Fingers crossed. All I know is that when it's my time to go, by God's grace, 80, 90 plus, I'm not trying to reincarnate back here. I keep telling God, I'm like, don't bring me back. Like,
Are you
I'm
serious?
done with coming back to Earth.
Come on.
I'm done with coming
Are
back to
you
Earth.
for real? Okay.
I'm for real.
Are you scared of death?
No, I'm not scared of death. The only thing that scares me about death is dying young and dying before my parents and like my sisters at a very young age. So that scares me because one, I love the people in my life and I want to continue to do life with them. I want to grow old with them. And then also, I don't want to put my family through that pain. Listen, I might probably sound cocky because how do I know they care about me that much? I'm assuming that they do. So that's
I'm
kind
sure
of
they do.
yeah, I'm sure they do. But that's the only thing that I guess, because the thing about it, spirits, when people leave their body, they can feel the pain of their loved ones, which I didn't know. I've come to find out over several conversations. They can still feel the heartache and pain of their loved ones. And sometimes that keeps them tethered to this earth. That's a whole conversation for a different day. But I'm not scared of death. What I am scared of is reincarnating back here because I believe in reincarnation. I keep telling God, I'm like, listen, I want to live a long life. Don't make me die before 90, right? But when I die, let me go in peace. Like I don't want to come back here and do all these games. You know what I
I thought you,
mean?
I thought you were about to say you don't want to reincarnate as a Nigerian. And that's what everybody's.
Even if I reincarnated as the richest person in the world, no.
You just don't want to you don't want to deal with this world again.
Like people fighting, wars, killings,
And now
all
it's
like I mean
crazy.
there's lots of love in the world and I try to focus on that because if you watch the news you're going to be sucked into all of the negativity and I think there's more positive in the world than negative, but the news only focuses on negative, of course. But being a human being is so overrated and like I don't know, there's no freedom. Like you're kind of I love my body, right? But it's like because I'm aware I'm a spirit, if I could just think of somewhere and just be there if I was a spirit. But as a body, as a human being, I have to book a plane ticket, have to get on the plane. Now I'm being silly, but I'm done with the politics
I
of
mean,
what
I
it
get what
means.
you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm done with the politics of what it means to be a human being. My time here up until I'm 90 plus by God's grace is to spread as much love as possible, open people's minds, and then what that's going to be my life's work, my vocation. There's nothing else like why am I coming back? Like what else do you want me to do? I'm just going to focus on the assignment that I'm on in this lifetime and then wrap it up. Maybe go to a different planet. A planet that's all love.
That's all.
No wars.
So basically, your message to God is, I don't want to come back here, but don't take me now till I'm like.
I know, yeah. Don't take me now. I have to put that. I'm like, do not take me now. Don't take, because we're gonna fight. Yeah, don't take me now.
It's like,
Don't take me now. I'm still enjoying life. Like,
I'm with you on that one.
yeah, yeah. I don't want to be reincarnated back, but I'm enjoying life right now. I'm enjoying this conversation. I'm
It's not
I'm
that
living
bad,
life.
but I don't want to come back.
Yeah, I'm enjoying. I'm having a good time. I'm having a great time. But I don't need to come back for a part two. I don't need to run it back.
What if you asked for it? What if you're the one that asked to be here?
Yeah, that's what people say. That there's so many different thoughts about reincarnation where it's like because of karma we have like 25,000 cycles that we have to come back and do until we learn certain lessons. I used to believe that, but now I keep going down a rabbit hole. I think that's BS. I don't, because we talk about free will. So why wouldn't I have free will as a spirit? You get what I'm trying to say?
But
So,
that's what I just said. You have free will. You chose it.
but oh, so you're saying,
You
what if I
wanted
come
to
back?
come.
What if
Yeah.
I come back and I don't realize that I chose it now that I'm a human being?
Yeah. You
Well,
wanted to.
I'm telling my
You
spirit
went
now.
back and you're like, wow, I didn't know it was that fun. I want to go back.
No, no, no. I'm telling my spirit now, right? Because when you come here, your memory is wiped, isn't it? I'm telling my spirit now that, listen, don't bring me back here.
I'll send you a link. I forgot his name. He talked about it, about the fact that when it's easy and when it's all love and all this that you're asking for, at a point you get bored of it. If you always love, you get bored of it and you say, okay, I want some suffering. I just want to experience suffering a little bit. And you ask for it and you come and then you hate the suffering when you're here. But when you die, you're like, whoa, that was a great experience. I've known love all my existence. Let me push it a little bit more. Let me be a very poor person when I go back. Let me suffer a little bit more, because to you as a spirit, this is like a dream. You just come and go.
Yeah.
But as humans, it's 90 years is so long. But maybe over there, when you go back, it's like 2 hours of sleep. And you're like, wow, that was amazing. So like I suffered, I went through all this test. I'm now, whatever over there, maybe a general now, and they move you
Yeah.
move you around or something. So hey, you never know, right?
And
You
I'm ready
never
to be
know.
bored. I'm ready to be bored. Like, it's enough. I'm ready to be bored. And my life is really good. Like, as a human being, even if I was born into a super rich family, part of living in this existence, you're going to be faced with adversity for sure. And like, you learn from adversity. So I get that. And sometimes when you go through it, it sharpens you. It really makes you a stronger person. But I don't want to be one of God's strongest soldiers. I'm naturally a happy person, so I always see the silver lining in most things. In the grand scheme of things, knock on wood, I would say that I've lived a pretty good life, right? Like, the adversity I faced, like maybe trying to find myself, feeling insecure in certain parts of my life, feeling kind of sad. But when I look at my life holistically, I'm like, okay, I have people that love me. I love what I'm doing. I try to be as positive and happy as possible. So a lot of times I think I'm in a pretty happy resonance. But I just think that, like, in the same breath, and I'm saying that because, again, people have lived much worse lives than I do. It's not like I grew up in a war zone. You know what I mean? The way I'm talking, you would think I grew up in a war zone and I'm like, I'm done
Oh
with
no,
Earth.
not at all.
But I just think that I personally don't want to reincarnate. This is probably not even my first life. This is the last thing I'll say. I think this whole idea of, oh, we have to come back, at least that's where I stand right now. This whole idea of, like, with reincarnation, we have to come back to learn certain lessons, and we can only learn the lessons by going through hardship. I think that's a way of programming us to come back. You know how I said that when you have a near-death experience, you see what you expect to see? So if you're told here, oh, you have to come back, then even though you've left your body, like, you're still connected to that belief system. So you do come back, but you don't have to. I'll leave it there. That's a
Yeah,
Pandora's
let's leave it there.
box. Yeah, let's leave it there.
I personally am not scared of death. I'm just worried how it would happen. I think the same thing what you said, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to, God forbid, be in a car accident and I'm,
Yeah, God forbid.
paralyzed and on my in a coma for 10 years, making people suffer. No,
No, no.
that's the only thing that worries me. The act itself, it's part of why we're here. That is normal. Look into parallel universe and watch a lot of documentaries on it. Read about topics on multiverse, the concept. I don't know how familiar you are with the parallel universe, the block universe. What's your take on this? On various theories on what we could be in. Maybe a simulation. What do you think?
I literally love this topic, and I actually have a very fascinating story for you and your
Let's
audience.
go. I can't wait.
So I had a woman on the show who believes, and I believe her too, because as she was talking about her story, I got goosebumps all over my body, but like goosebumps, kind of like an intuitive confirmation. But long
Yeah.
story short, she believes that she came from a parallel universe. So here's the story. So one night, she's 23 years old. She goes to bed with her partner. Her two kids are in bed. I think they were 2 and 3 at the time. And she sleeps, and while she's sleeping, she starts to dream. And in the dream, she's in her mother's bedroom. It's dark. She's 10 years old. And it's, one of those nights before it's time to go to school, right? So she kind of sleeps. She wakes up in the dream and she sees her sister, her 16-year-old sister, getting ready for school. And she's so excited to see her sister because her sister died, right? So she's like, oh my gosh, she's dreaming about her sister. She hugs her sister and all that stuff. So her sister's like, get off of me. So her mom comes into the room and she's like, it's time for you to get ready for school. So she's thinking, oh, this dream is really long. Okay, whatever, I'm dreaming. So she puts on her clothes and everything. She gets ready for school. She goes to school. She comes back and she's thinking to herself, why haven't I woken up? This is a very, very long dream. My kids are probably hungry right now. Like, why am I still sleeping? This is a very long dream. So that happens, but the gag is she doesn't wake up. The next day comes, she's going to school. She's like, what's going on? So again, like I said at the beginning, she was just 23. She went to bed, kissed her kids goodnight, and she was with her partner. Now she's in a reality that she thought she was dreaming where she's 10 years old with her sister, who she, in the first reality, had already died, right? A lot of the things she had lived before were happening to her again, right? Like the people she would meet, she knew who they would be to her, right? If she met someone for the first time in this new reality, kind of reliving her life, she could tell, like, okay, this person is going to be my friend. This person is going to be the father of my kids. And unfortunately, she knew as time went on, she started to forget certain details, but she knew her sister was going to die. She just didn't remember how it happened. Long story short, her sister did end up dying again. And she couldn't stop it. They tried to stop it, but she couldn't stop it. So I say all that to say, right? It sounds like, and we theorized about this, and she's talked to different people about it, where it's like she jumped into a different timeline, right? Where everything about her life was the same, but there were certain subtle changes. Like the atmosphere was different, food tasted differently, and colors looked less vibrant. So she was living in a different reality, but she couldn't figure it out back then, right? So the reason I started with that story, because obviously we're talking about parallel universes here, that's the closest thing I've come across to someone jumping timelines, right? And when people talk about time travel, I don't think time travel is possible without understanding that parallel universe or multiverse theory is a thing, right? Because you can't go back in time in the same timeline, but you could go back in time into a parallel timeline, if that makes any sense. So that was very fascinating. So if I never believed in parallel universes or the multiverse theory, that story like broke that concept open in my mind. So to answer your question, I definitely believe in multiverse and parallel timelines. And I actually believe that we're probably hopping parallel timelines often, but we're not even aware of it. I think for her, what she said too is that she believes that maybe these things happen very often, but a lot of times we're not supposed to remember if we've jumped from a different timeline. You know what I mean? But she believes that she remembered so she can talk about the story and tell people like this is a real thing. So I think it's happening all the time. And the reason why I think it's happening all the time, because I don't know if you've heard of the Mandela effect.
Yeah, I've heard of Mandela.
Yeah. So a lot of people have a collective memory of one thing happening, and then all of a sudden, the thing that they knew to be true is no longer true. So, for example, it's called the Mandela effect because a lot of people remember Mandela dying in the 90s in prison, and other people remember him dying in the 2000s, right? So, and I've actually even had an experience similar to that, which with this prominent fitness instructor, I think in the 70s and 80s, I'm forgetting his name, but he recently died, I think last year. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I swear this man has already died. I remember seeing that this guy died. I didn't say anything. I didn't look it up. TikTok, I go on TikTok a day later. So many people are making videos like, wait, this guy has already died. Like people were commenting like, oh, wait, so I'm not crazy. So it's hard to pinpoint because someone could just say, it's a false memory. And I'm sure that could be a thing sometimes, but these things happen. So I definitely believe in parallel universes and multiverse theory. But I think when you jump a timeline, it's such a subtle difference that you don't even realize that you've jumped that timeline. You know what I mean? I have another example for you. This woman, her husband had prostate cancer. So when he was diagnosed, she's very into the spiritual and metaphysical. Without any medical intervention, first of all, she denied that that was part of their reality. Without any medical intervention, he was healed. They did tests a couple months later, and there was no sighting of this cancer, right? So one of her theories outside of maybe getting remote healing is that they've probably shifted into a timeline where he's not sick, right? Like that's not something he was in resonance with. So I think, again, I think it's happening often, but where most people are not aware of it, because if you were aware of every single time you were changing lanes, you'll probably go crazy, probably go into psychosis, right? So that's one thing. And in terms of time, so I don't think time is linear. Everything is happening all at the same time. So my younger self, my current self, and my older self are all existing at the same time. So going back to that woman's example where she jumped timelines, but she was 10 years old, I think that goes into the time is not linear. You know what I mean? So because time is not linear and then you put parallel universes on top of it, then you can access different versions of you at any age because everything's happening at the same time. And I think I don't know if you believe in reincarnation and past lives, but even the term past lives is not really a correct term because all of our lives are happening all at once. So that was a long-winded
No, no.
answer, but I
I
hope
mean, the
I
blood.
answered your question.
Yeah, you did. The blood theory, it's a scientific theory, so it's not factual, but at least it's been looked into. So it's not something that's strange. I mean, I don't know if I believe it is real, but
Hmm.
it can be. It's not hard to understand that it's possible because time is not real. Time is a construct of man. So it's possible that everything is existing all at once and we're just being aware of each. We're just shifting consciousness of each stage in our lives. It's a strange phenomenon. It's very interesting too. And
What do you
that's
think?
yeah, go
Sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, finish up. What you want to
No,
ask?
I don't want to. I'm going to ask you a question. I don't want you to forget your
No.
thought.
I'm interested. Let
Okay.
me hear the question.
I was going to say, what do you think about the story I told you about the woman and her kind of going to bed 23, waking up 10 years old?
Yeah, what I wanted to ask you, a follow-up question was what triggers it? That's what I wanted to ask you. Did okay, she just went to bed. So it wasn't like something happened. She just went to sleep and woke up basically in another timeline.
Yes.
That's okay. Did she at any point realize that she's back in the original timeline or life just went on that way? Because I've heard stories where people, said, they die in different timelines, but they are alive in another one.
Hmm.
Like we're never dead. Even when you
Hmm.
die here, you're somewhere. Your consciousness just moves to somewhere else. So
Yes.
I mean, these are all concepts.
Actually, she said that's one of the theories that she came up with as to what she thinks might have happened to her is the other thing could be maybe in that other timeline she died at 23, but then her consciousness hopped into her in another timeline but younger. So that's another theory that she jumped into a parallel universe. And I think that the movie that perfectly kind of describes some of what we're talking about is the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. One of my
Yeah,
favorite
I've not
movies.
really watched it,
You need to
but I
watch
should.
it, Stan. It's one of those movies I had to watch it like 2, 3 times to understand all of the different concepts, but it's a really good movie, and I think it really highlights parallel universes and jumping timelines really, really well.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of parallel movies, but I haven't seen that one. I hear it's very interesting.
It's
I'll
very
look it
good.
up and I'll check it out.
Very good.
Oh, that's nice. I like this. You know what? I would definitely go back and watch those. I don't think I've watched those sessions of yours. I'm gonna look them up. It's something that we sure can explore.
Yeah,
There's no way to physically say it's factual, but it's interesting. It's an
very
interesting
interesting.
concept. Yeah. What do you think? I was trying to move to quantum physics and how it
Yeah.
all connects to this. In the future, do you think it would explain when we do understand it? Because now we don't understand much about quantum mechanics or physics. But we have an idea. With probably in the introduction phase as humans. But when we do fully understand it, or at least well understand it, do you think it would confirm all this mysterious experiences, spirituality, all these concepts that that we're talking about now? Do you think that's the connecting thing? Because
Yeah.
it's similar to a lot of spiritual experiences. A lot of people have actually compared it to it explaining the spirit world. Do you think knowing more about quantum physics, I don't know if you've looked into quantum physics, but if you have, you think it will confirm the evidence of spirituality in the future?
Yeah. So, to your point, I can't even try or attempt to explain quantum physics or quantum mechanics. But I do think that but I have looked into it, of course, and I'm aware of it, and from the first time I came across different concepts from quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement, when you talk about the 2 particles, no matter
Yeah,
how far
exactly.
apart they are, they're still in resonance with each other. I definitely do believe
They
that quantum
behave
physics.
similar.
Yes, exactly. Quantum physics and quantum mechanics are going to explain spiritual phenomena, metaphysical phenomena, right? So I think that, again, we live in a world that is very focused on hard data and trying to only look at things that could be measured. And I think quantum mechanics, quantum physics will allow us to measure certain things that right now are considered woo woo or metaphysical out there, maybe improbable or impossible, right? So I definitely do think it is the science of spirituality. Though I think science itself in general already speaks to different metaphysical dimensions, but that's a different story for a different day. But I think quantum mechanics and quantum physics will give hard evidence to the fact that there are other things out play that we cannot see with the naked eye because we are cosmically blind. So empty space is not really empty space.
There's something everywhere. There's really nothing like an empty space.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I'm very excited to kind of see how quantum physics and quantum mechanics evolves. And I think it requires the scientific community to not be dogmatic because science is a religion in and of itself. And people are
You
very
think
in
so?
academia. Yeah, and academia is very dogmatic.
I don't think so.
And a lot of times people are afraid
I
to.
think people in science can be dogmatic. I don't think science itself is.
Well, I think, yeah, to your point, people in science can be dogmatic. Okay, I guess people can even say with religion, people within religion can be dogmatic because when you look at religion, the bare
Oh,
bones, I
religion
just.
itself is dogmatic. That's different because
But religion,
because
religion, right?
religion itself, it has to be dogmatic to be religion. There has to be laws and structure that you can't go out of.
Right. So I think of,
But
yeah,
science is just a
exactly.
process. It has nothing to do with humans.
Yeah, but the thing, I think some certain scientific principles have been kind of done in a way to be dogmatic.
Okay.
So, for example, when it comes to collecting data that cannot be, I guess it's
Measured, quantified. Yeah.
measured, quantified, is not really looked at as hard evidence. That in and of itself, I think, is kind of dogmatic, right?
I have to push back on that. But there's a
Mhm.
reason why, though. If everything is accepted into science that's not measurable, then nothing will be excluded. It
But does
has to be.
anything have to be excluded? And that's the thing, though. If you start excluding things, and I know that there at some
Yeah, but
point you
nothing
have to
works
have.
if you don't exclude. Nothing would work. We wouldn't have planes. We wouldn't have laptops. We wouldn't have phones. If you include everything, then nothing works. So it has to be. I mean, I'm also spiritual, so I'm not against exploring the unknown. But at the same time, I don't blame science for it. I think science is the way it is, and the people in science, like you said, might have some dogmatic views. That I don't argue with that because there are scientists who go against other scientists and stuff like that. So there are some people who do wrong science, bad science, definitely. But science itself as a process, I think is the best humans have ever come up with. And it's far from dogma. Because it's a process that we live by.
I get what you're saying. I think for sure it's a process. To your point with religion, they exclude things because if you start taking too many things in, then it becomes convoluted. But I think exclusion itself, right? Because I think, yes, you can go down a rabbit hole and say, this doesn't make sense and decide to focus on what makes sense. But to not even consider it, and I think the academic scientific community sometimes they can be pretty specific about what they're not willing to consider, or even if they consider it, the people who are trying to consider it have to consider it in the shadows because that could tie into their credibility as a scientist, right?
But
Because
yet
at some point,
they're
sorry, go ahead.
restricted as scientists. So it's not, you can't include it because you want to include it. The description of science is, I think it has to be measured, repeated, falsifiable. If your theory or your concept is not falsifiable, it can't be science. And spirituality is unfalsifiable. It's just It's just what it is. You can't prove it. Science has to, it's like saying, okay, if you meet somebody who believes in God and you say, is there anything I can say right now to make you not believe in God? What would they answer? Nothing, right? There's
Mhm.
nothing you can tell them. It doesn't matter. You can bring the biggest evidence and say, hey, this is evidence that there's no God. They will just say, it's fine, I still believe, no matter what you do, right? That's unfalsifiable. You can't falsify it. But science has to be falsifiable. It has to be, there has to be a way to prove every scientific discovery wrong. It has to. If you can't prove it wrong, then it's not factual. So I think that's the problem with science and and spirituality or religion, whatever the concept we want to call it. But like I said, the connecting factor might be something like quantum physics, where even science can explain quantum physics, but they work with it, right? But they don't know the full details. They don't know how it works. Everything is magical or mysterious, just like spirituality is. So that's might be like the bridgey thing that comes, like I said, the material scientist I had on. That's what he's working on. He's trying to merge with quantum physics, or I think quantum mechanics, whichever one they use. But he's trying to merge spirituality with science, and that's what he has a lot of theories, and he's published a lot of work. And he's also Asian, so he knows about the Eastern religion and the Eastern rituals. But yeah, that's what I think. Not trying
Yeah.
to
Yeah, no,
discredit you. Yeah,
no,
just trying to
of course
explain it.
not. No, and I appreciate your perspective. It's good to know. And I think for me it still goes down to, yes, I understand that that's how science works, but I think that there needs to be
More
flexibility
tolerance. Yeah.
and more tolerance and humility, because I think if science was more like, this is what we know for now, because, to just be locked in to a certain theory and not even be willing to expand on it if there are new findings, whether they're quantifiable or not. I still think that when you have a large mass of people having a certain experience, whether or not you can actually measure it or not, it should still be considered. Potentially new theories should be posed, right? So I'm just saying that I think science and spirituality do not have to be separate from one another. And I think that we're getting to a place now, and I mean, hopefully, we're getting to a point, like you said, with quantum physics and quantum mechanics, where that now becomes, I guess, the hard science that really dives into the ineffable, the parts of the world that we cannot explain because we're, kind of talking about different dimensions and talking about things that our human brain cannot necessarily fathom or conceptualize. So yeah, I hear what you're saying.
100%. Yeah. Okay. This was very interesting. I loved every bit of it. I hope you did too.
I enjoyed it. Thank
How about
you.
didn't too much of a pushback, but I really planned that. I wanted to get the best out of you.
Yeah, no, I love pushbacks because it gets me thinking. I love to be because I'm open-minded. So maybe I haven't looked at something from a different perspective. So when we have dialogue like this, it gets me excited. I'm like, "Ooh, this is nice."
I appreciate you coming on. This is almost 2 hours of your time. I know you're very busy. Every question was diligently answered. You got me thinking more about, NDE especially. I mean, I would
Mhm.
definitely, your shows are what really got me into exploring more about it. I mean, I've heard about it, I've seen different clips, but having those one-on-one interviews you've had and had these people pour out their heart to you and what the experiences are have been really eye-opening to me. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'll recommend, your podcast is Shifting Dimensions. Hope I got it right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Whoever's watching or listening, please check it out. Awesome, awesome, awesome interviews, awesome podcast. And I love having you here today. Hope you get to come back and see
Yes.
us and talk to us again sometime soon.
Yeah, Stan, this has been amazing. I always appreciate the opportunity to be in the guest seat, and I loved our conversation. I loved the back and forth that we had, and thank you so much for your platform and for inviting me to share this space with you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
We'll let you go. Appreciate the time and hope to see you next time. Okay.
Yes, yes, sounds good.